So today, the topic that I love is how to grow up emotionally.
Welcome! Here is your hostess and coach, Chandra Zas, helping people make food and mood changes doable without missing out. Go ahead, high five that like button, subscribe and share while you're there.
There's this really cool concept that I have adopted from my teacher where she talks about emotional childhood and emotional adulthood. It's a really, really powerful concept. So what I see with gut health and with the average default person is that when most of us were never taught how to be emotional adults. Most of our parents are emotional children. They don't know how their emotions work. They don't know how to be an emotional adult. So one of the steps of gut health, of getting to a place where you're eating foods that fuel your body, which is the baseline of gut health, one of the stepping stones to get there is emotional adulthood. Because when we are emotional children, then it's the world's fault. It's the kid on the playground hurt my feelings. It's the tragedy in life that made me binge eat. It's the things outside of me that made me do things. And when we look at the world that way, we feel really powerless. And that's why it's called emotional childhood. It's when we blame things outside of us for the way that we feel. Now, on the flip side of that, emotional adulthood is taking responsibility for how we feel. When we take responsibility for how we feel, then we're in control of how we feel, and we don't have to solve our emotional problems by using food or things externally like shopping to help us feel better, because we know that our feelings come from inside of us, that we're responsible for our emotions, and therefore we can fix our emotions, or we can manage our emotions, or we can feel our emotions, or we can shift our emotions because we're empowered. So I don't want you to think about being an emotional child as like being less than or negatively. It's more just like a growing process. Like, we're all children. There's nothing wrong. In fact, there's a lot of beautiful things about being a child. But as far as living a big life and making habit changes and getting to a really gut healthy lifestyle, there is a growing up that is required of us, that is required of like owning how we feel and why we feel what we feel, and flagging the feelings that drive us to overeating, that drive us to binging, that drive us to going crazy in the cookie box or whatever, the ice cream attack, letting the ice cream attack us at night. So here's the thing. I even hear it, I have a little one and I hear it on the playground, don't hurt her feelings, or so-and-so made them feel this way. So we're taught this from such a young age that it's not your fault if this is how you think, this is how you've thought that the world works. But here's the thing. No matter what happens outside of us, no matter who says what, I have a good story for you guys. So my man, I know he loves me immensely. We had a little tough time lately, and I was kind of pressing him of like, what's going on? Like, why are you a little withdrawn? Like, what's going on? And he threw a comment at me that made me practice what I preach. So he told me, he said, I'm getting kind of bored of you. And I was like, what? Inside, I was like, what did he just say? What does this mean? And we're actually driving. It's like one of our first dates in a long time. We don't get to go on many dates these days. And we're on one of our very random, few, rare dates. And we're just about to get to my friend's wedding. So there's also like not a whole lot of time to wrap up this conversation. And so I sat there and I like absorbed, and I like used what I know of my coaching tools to apply to this situation. So from my coaching tools perspective, my partner said words. Now, what he said, I get to interpret in my brain. So a lot of people would probably feel pretty darn bad about what he said. You can feel a lot of different bad feelings, but generally, probably most people feel bad. And I did feel a little bad. There was a part of me that was like, worst case scenario, our marriage is ending. Like, part of my brain went there, and I was like, wait a minute. He just said words. He can say whatever he wants. I get to make it mean whatever I want to make it mean. I get to choose how I navigate through this dynamic. How I feel. I get to choose what I make it mean. I get to choose, and depending on what I make it mean is going to depend on how I react. And I'm heading to my friend's wedding, who I'm really excited to go to her wedding. And I'm like, wow, I could turn this into a really dark evening. I could get really cold and really angry, and I could really get into a really big fight with him and give him the cold shoulder. And I could have I remember looking at the night and I was like, I could make this into a really bad thing. Or I could just tell myself that that is his opinion. It doesn't mean it's true. And I could get curious and I could ask him what he meant by it, and I could continue the conversation, and I could show up as an emotional adult. I didn't have to blame him for him making me feel bad, because this is what I do with my clients. This is the gold of the gold, the cream of the cream. We get to make things mean what we want them to mean. And I'm not talking about lying. I'm not talking about like being overly positive. I'm talking about like realizing that we have a choice of the story that we tell inside of our head and what we make. A lot of times someone says one thing and we make it mean something. 99% of the time we make it mean something different. We interpret it in our own filter. We apply it to ourselves. We skew things, and we always we're all doing this all the time. It's what our brains do. It's impossible to directly communicate, even though a lot of us try. My husband and I actually really try to directly communicate, but we still fail sometimes. That was a big tangent, but it was such a powerful story of that I could have gone down a really hard path, and I was able to catch my brain, watch the stories, look at the options that I had of how did I want to show up for the rest of the evening? What did I need to think and feel to do that? Did I need to believe that we're going to figure it out? What space did I need to get into so that I could still have a really good evening? Not bullshitting myself or him. It was definitely an intense thing to hear and to say. And I could still show up and be an emotional adult. I didn't have to go into emotional childhood and blame him for hurting my feelings. So when we realize that we create our own feelings inside of us, and with mental and mind management, that we can manage our feelings. And I'm not talking about feeling happy all the time. There's still a lot of emotions that are really important to feel, a lot of hard negative emotions. But I'm talking about especially like the blame and the regret and the shame. There's a lot of emotions that are just not useful and that just don't move us anywhere. And blame is one of the big ones. So to grow up, to become an actualized adult that eats food as fuel, that doesn't need to turn externally to solve problems, it means owning our emotions. It also means owning our gut health. It means connecting the dots of like, I'm responsible for what I put in my mouth because that is what determines my gut health. I'm responsible for the thoughts in my head because that's what really determines how I feel. Yes, it's big work to do, but there is freedom in this work. There is agency. There is gut health. There is emotional adulthood. There is owning your emotions. Yeah, it takes some responsibility, but in that responsibility, we get power. And that power, it's a big life when you're living in an empowered way of owning your inner world. Your gut inner world, your emotional inner world, it's all connected. So I hope I've inspired you to own your emotions, to own your gut health, and to become an emotional adult. Most of us are stuck in childhood. That is the default. So most of us are there. If you ever find yourself blaming anyone else for how you feel you're in emotional childhood. So own it, grow up, and get that gut health in line. All right, have a beautiful day. I'll see you next week.